Welcome, spicy lady. Sometimes the reason someone is alone is not because they cannot be loved, but because they refuse to accept anything that feels false. There is a certain type of woman people often misunderstand in modern dating. She is not confused about relationships. She is not desperate for attention. And she is not chasing the idea of being chosen. She simply sees things differently. A Sigma female tends to observe people more than she reacts to them. She notices patterns early. The way someone talks when they are interested. The way consistency fades after the first excitement. The way words often arrive faster than actions ever do. And over time, she starts to separate real connection from emotional noise. This is where her dating experience becomes unusual. Many people enter relationships based on potential, chemistry, or temporary intensity. But she becomes more focused on behavior over time. If actions and words do not match, she mentally steps back, not out of anger, but out of clarity, because she has learned something important. Strong emotions at the beginning do not guarantee stability later. So, instead of rushing into connections, she becomes more selective. Not because she's closed off, but because she is careful about who gets access to her time, energy, and emotional space. This is also why many relationships never fully develop with her. Some people mistake her calm nature for disinterest. Others expect quick emotional bonding that she refuses to force. And some simply cannot match the level of depth she naturally thinks on. I end this video. We're going to break down the 10 brutal reasons Sigma females rarely have boyfriends. Some of these truths are uncomfortable. Some are eye-opening. And number 10 will hit differently and bring everything into perspective. Let's dive deeper. The spicy lady, number 1. The brutal truth. She would rather be alone than loved incorrectly. There comes a point in the life of a Sigma female when loneliness stops scaring her. And that changes everything. Most people stay in relationships because they are terrified of starting over. Terrified of sleeping alone. Terrified of watching everyone else move on while they sit with silence. So they tolerate things they know are slowly breaking them. They stay with people who misunderstand them, drain them, disrespect them, or make them feel emotionally invisible. Not because they are happy, but because loneliness feels heavier. But a Sigma female often reaches a very different conclusion. She realizes that being with the wrong person can feel lonelier than actually being alone. That is the part many people do not understand. Imagine sitting next to someone every day and still feeling emotionally disconnected from them. Imagine explaining your thoughts, your fears, your dreams, only to feel unheard every single time. That kind of loneliness cuts deeper than an empty room ever could. Over time, she becomes more careful with who she allows into her life, not colder, just more aware. She starts noticing how some people only love convenience, some only love attention, some love the idea of her, but have no interest in understanding the real person beneath the surface. And once she cannot unsee it. This is why she would rather wait than force connection, because she knows what it costs to lose herself trying to keep someone else comfortable. Many Sigma females have experienced relationships where they slowly became smaller versions of themselves. They talked less, questioned themselves more, felt emotionally exhausted all the time. And the scary part is these relationships often look completely normal from the outside. That experience changes them permanently. Now, they would rather protect their peace than perform happiness for the world. And yes, sometimes this means they stay single longer than other people. Sometimes they watch friends settle down while they continue walking alone. Sometimes they wonder if real connection is even possible anymore. But deep down, they know something important. Temporary loneliness is survivable. Living a fake life beside the wrong person is not. Number 2. She notices emotional cowardice everywhere. One thing that quietly destroys attraction for a Sigma female is emotional cowardice. And once she notices it, it becomes impossible for her to ignore. A lot of people today avoid uncomfortable conversations like their life depends on it. Instead of speaking honestly, they disappear for hours and return acting normal. Instead of saying, I am upset, they become cold, sarcastic, distant, or passive-aggressive. Instead of communicating clearly, They send mixed signals and expect other people to magically decode them. A Sigma female notices these patterns fast. What frustrates her is not imperfection. She understands that everyone has fears, insecurities, and emotional wounds. The real problem is when someone lacks the courage to face issues directly. Because in her mind, avoiding problems does not create peace. It just creates confusion with silence wrapped around it. For example, imagine dating someone who suddenly changes their energy but insists nothing is wrong. Their replies become dry. Their tone changes. The warmth disappears. But every time you ask, they say, "I'm fine." Now the relationship slowly turns into emotional detective work instead of honest connection. That drains her mentally. She would rather hear an uncomfortable truth than be trapped in emotional guessing games for weeks. And this is where many relationships lose her respect completely. A Sigma female pays attention to how people handle tension. Can they communicate without shutting down? Can they admit when they are wrong? Can they express frustration without trying to emotionally punish the other person? Because many people call avoidance keeping the peace when really they are just avoiding accountability. There is a difference between being calm and being emotionally unavailable. One is maturity. The other is fear dressed up as self-control. And the older a Sigma female gets, the more allergic she becomes to emotionally immature behavior. She has no interest in relationships where basic communication feels like pulling teeth. What many people fail to realize is this. Direct communication creates safety. Silence creates anxiety. That is why emotional courage matters so much to her. Not perfection, not smooth words, not charm, just honesty strong enough to survive uncomfortable conversations. Number 3, she has a dangerous level of self-awareness. A Sigma female often has a level of self-awareness that quietly exhausts her because while most people are busy studying other people, she is constantly studying herself. She notices her own patterns, the way certain words trigger her, the way childhood experiences still shape her reactions, the way she sometimes pushes people away when she feels misunderstood. She catches herself overthinking, shutting down, doubting people too quickly, or expecting too much emotionally. And the scary part is she does not run from these truths. She sits with them. That kind of self-awareness changes the way she sees relationships forever, because once someone spends years understanding their own mind deeply, shallow connections start feeling unbearable. Conversations that stay on the surface for too long leave her mentally disconnected. Talking only about gossip, appearances, trends, or meaningless drama starts feeling emotionally empty after a while. It is like feeding someone candy all day when what they really need is real food. For example, imagine her sitting with someone she is dating. She wants to talk about fears, emotional habits, life experiences, hidden insecurities, dreams, regrets, and the deeper reasons people become who they are. Meanwhile, the other person only wants to flirt, joke around, or avoid serious conversations completely. At first, she tries to adjust. Then slowly she feels alone even while sitting beside them. This is why many Sigma females struggle to feel mentally connected to people. Their mind naturally searches beneath the surface of things. They pay attention to contradictions. They notice emotional tension behind smiles. They observe how people behave when they are stressed, jealous, insecure, or uncomfortable. And because they already spend so much time confronting themselves internally, they lose patience for people who never question themselves at all. What makes this even harder is that self-awareness is not always peaceful. Sometimes it becomes overanalysis. Sometimes it makes her too observant for her own good. She can replay conversations for hours trying to understand what was genuine and what was not. But deep down, she would still rather live uncomfortable truth than comfortable illusion. Because once a person truly understands themselves, fake connection becomes impossible to tolerate for long. And that is why small talk often feels like starvation to her mind. Number 4, she rarely falls in love with potential anymore. One of the biggest reasons Sigma females struggle with modern dating is because they eventually stop falling in love with potential. When they are younger, many of them believe in possibilities. They believe effort means growth is coming. They believe love can inspire people to change. So they ignore red flags and focus on who someone could become instead of who they already are. They hear things like, "I will do better," I'm just going through a phase. You are the only person who understands me. And for a while, they hold on to those words because they want to believe them. But after enough disappointment, something changes. They begin realizing that promises are easy. Consistency is rare. That is when they stop listening only to words and start studying patterns instead. A Sigma female pays attention to repeated behavior. If someone constantly says they care but disappears whenever things get difficult, she notices. If someone keeps talking about future plans but never follows through on anything small, she notices that too. Because eventually she understands a brutal truth most people learn too late. People often tell you who they want to be. Their habits reveal who they actually are. And this shift completely changes the way she dates. For example, imagine a man who speaks beautifully about loyalty, commitment, and emotional maturity. At first, he sounds perfect, but over time, she notices he avoids accountability, disappears during conflict, and only communicates properly when he feels like losing her. Most people would still cling to the beautiful words. A Sigma female starts trusting the repeated actions instead. This is why some people call her cold or difficult to impress. But what they mistake for coldness is usually pattern recognition built from experience. She simply no longer romanticizes unfinished people while sacrificing her own emotional peace in the process, because loving potential can become dangerous. You start dating imaginary versions of people instead of reality. You keep waiting for effort that never arrives. You excuse disrespect because you are attached to who they might become one day. And sometimes years disappear that way. So now, she values consistency over charm, actions over promises, emotional stability over empty chemistry. Because she learned that words are the cheapest currency on earth. Anyone can speak beautifully for a moment. Very few people can live beautifully over time. Number 5. She's difficult to manipulate emotionally. A Sigma female becomes very difficult to manipulate emotionally because life eventually teaches her to recognize patterns most people overlook. At first, she may fall for the same things everyone else falls for. Intense attention, deep conversations at 2 a.m., someone making her feel uniquely understood. Someone saying all the right things at the perfect time. But after enough experience, she starts noticing that manipulation rarely looks evil in the beginning. Sometimes it looks romantic. That is what makes it dangerous. For example, love bombing does not feel toxic at first. It feels flattering. Someone texts constantly, overwhelms you with affection, talks about the future too quickly, and makes you feel like the center of their emotional universe. But over time, she notices something strange. The intensity arrives fast, but consistency never follows. And once she sees that pattern, something inside her changes permanently. The same thing happens with guilt tactics. Some people do not communicate honestly when they are upset. Instead, they make you feel responsible for their emotions. Suddenly, you are apologizing for things you did not even do just to restore peace. A Sigma female eventually becomes highly sensitive to this emotional pressure because she understands that real love should not feel like psychological debt. Then comes the silent treatment. One of the most emotionally exhausting behaviors in relationships. Instead of discussing problems directly, someone disappears emotionally to punish the other person. No explanation, no communication, just distance designed to create anxiety and confusion. A Sigma female begins noticing that emotionally mature people do not use silence as a weapon. And perhaps the most disturbing pattern she learns to recognize is fake vulnerability. Some people reveal pain, trauma, or emotional wounds not to connect genuinely, but to lower your defenses and gain emotional control. Once she realizes vulnerability can also be strategic, she becomes much more careful about who she trusts. This is why manipulation rarely works on her for long. She watches actions closely, energy closely, timing closely. She notices when affection only appears after bad behavior. She notices when apologies repeat without change. And once attraction becomes associated with manipulation, it dies completely, not slowly, permanently. Because after someone learns the psychology behind emotional games, they can never fully unsee it again. And nothing destroys emotional connection faster than realizing somebody is trying to control your emotions instead of protecting your heart. Number 5. She often intimidates men who initially pursued her confidently. One thing many people do not talk about is how often Sigma females intimidate the very men who confidently pursued them in the beginning. At first, everything feels exciting. Her independence feels refreshing. Her calm nature feels mysterious. Her emotional control feels attractive. Some men become fascinated because she does not behave like everyone else they have dated before. But then reality slowly begins to replace fantasy. The man realizes she has boundaries that are not performative. She actually means them. She is not easily pressured. She does not suddenly abandon her routines, values, or self-respect just because romance entered the picture. And for some people, that becomes unexpectedly uncomfortable. Because a lot of men are used to attraction giving them emotional influence. They are used to charm working quickly, used to attention creating control, used to people becoming emotionally attached before truly being moves differently. She watches consistency. She watches emotional maturity. She watches how someone handles frustration, rejection, stress, and disagreement. And if something feels manipulative or emotionally unstable, she quietly pulls back instead of chasing harder. This is where some men become defensive. For example, a man may confidently pursue her for weeks fascinated by her intelligence and independence. But once he realizes compliments alone will not impress her, his energy changes. Suddenly, he starts making subtle jokes to humble her. He becomes dismissive when she expresses confidence. He accuses her of being too difficult simply because she refuses to tolerate behaviors she already outgrew emotionally years ago. And this happens more often than people think because some people love strong women in theory, but struggle when they encounter a woman who cannot be emotionally controlled through charm, inconsistency, or attention alone. A Sigma female also notices something else most people miss. The moment a person realizes they cannot easily influence her emotionally, their true character often appears. Some rise to the occasion and become more genuine. Others become insecure, competitive, or passive-aggressive. That is why she pays close attention to how people react when they lose control of the emotional dynamic, because confidence is easy when things go your way. Character reveals itself when influence stops working. And the truth is many Sigma females are not intimidating because they are trying to dominate anyone. They are intimidating because they already learned how dangerous it is to abandon themselves just to keep someone interested. Number 6. She refuses to become emotionally manageable. There is a quiet moment in many relationships where something subtle starts to shift. At first, everything feels normal, even exciting, but then small comments begin to appear almost casually. Why are you so intense? You think too much. You need to relax. On the surface, they sound harmless, like advice, like concern, but underneath, there is often a different message hiding. It is the request for emotional simplicity. Many people do not say it directly, but what they really mean is this: make yourself easier for me to understand. Make your thoughts less layered. Make your emotions less deep. Make your reactions more predictable. So I do not have to think too much. A Sigma female recognizes this shift very quickly. Not because she is paranoid, but because she has spent enough time understanding people to know when someone is slowly trying to reduce her complexity instead of understanding it. For example, imagine she is sharing something meaningful. Maybe she is explaining why a certain situation felt off emotionally or why she needs space to think before reacting. Instead of listening, the response she gets is, "You are overthinking it." At first, she may try to simplify herself just to keep peace. She explains less. She questions herself more. She tries to sound easier, lighter, more digestible. But over time, something inside her resists because she realizes she is not being asked to communicate better. She is being asked to become smaller emotionally so someone else feels more comfortable. And that is where she stops adjusting. A Sigma female does not struggle with being complex. She struggles with being misunderstood and then blamed for it. She understands that real connection should not require self-editing. The right person does not ask her to think less deeply. They try to understand why she thinks that way. So when she senses emotional simplification being demanded instead of emotional understanding being offered, her interest slowly fades, not out of anger, but out of clarity, because she would rather sit alone with her full emotional depth than sit beside someone who only accepts the parts of her that are easy to handle. And in the end, that becomes her quiet boundary. Not everyone gets access to her mind, and she is no longer willing to shrink it just to be accepted. Number 7, she doesn't confuse attention with connection. There is a quiet difference she learns to notice early in life. The difference between being noticed and being understood. At first glance, they look similar. Someone gives attention, sends messages often, compliments her appearance, or shows interest in her energy. On the surface, it feels like connection is forming. But over time, she starts seeing a pattern most people miss. Attention is easy. Understanding is rare. Many people are drawn to what they can see. Her looks, her calm personality, her independence, or the mystery she carries. They admire her from a distance or from the surface, but rarely make the effort to go deeper. They talk about her, not with her inner world. And that is where the disconnect begins. For example, she might open up about something meaningful, maybe how she processes life differently, or why she prefers solitude sometimes. Instead of curiosity, she gets surface level replies like, "You are different," or "You are interesting." It sounds like a compliment, but it does not reach her mind. It does not touch the deeper layers of who she is. After a while, that kind of interaction becomes tiring. Not because she hates attention, but because she realizes attention without understanding feels empty. It feels like someone standing in front of a closed door and talking to the surface instead of trying to enter the room. This is why compliments stop impressing her. She has heard enough of them to know they do not always mean depth. Someone can say she is beautiful, smart, or mysterious, but still have no real understanding of how she thinks, what she values, or what she struggles with internally. What actually captures her interest is accurate observation. When someone notices the small things, when they remember details she never repeated, when they understand her silence without forcing her to explain everything, when they respond to her mind instead of just reacting to her presence, that is when she pays attention. Because for her, real connection is not about being admired loudly. It is about being understood quietly. And once she experiences that level of understanding, everything else starts to feel like noise pretending to be connection. Number 9, she sees how transactional modern dating has become. There is a point where she starts noticing something uncomfortable about modern dating. It does not happen all at once. It comes slowly through conversations, patterns, and repeated experiences. People begin to feel less like individuals and more like evaluations that at first it looks normal. Someone asks about your job, your lifestyle, your goals, but soon the questions start to feel like silent scoring systems. What can you offer me? How stable is your life? How useful are you to my future? How impressive do you look on paper? It starts to feel less like connection and more like negotiation. She notices how quickly attraction can turn into a kind of silent comparison. People sizing each other up, trying to figure out value instead of understanding character. It feels like emotional business instead of human connection. For example, she might meet someone who seems interested in her. They talk, laugh, and exchange stories. But as the conversation continues, she can feel the shift. The questions become more calculated, less about who she is as a person, and more about what she brings to the table. Status, appearance, lifestyle, potential benefits. And something about that energy quietly pushes her away. Not because she expects perfection, but because she is looking for something deeper than performance. Most dating environments today reward presentation. How well you speak, how attractive you appear, how entertaining you are, how desirable you seem in a short amount of time. People learn how to perform interest instead of actually building it. But she notices the difference between performance and presence. Performance is loud, but temporary. Presence is quiet, but lasting. She is not impressed by people who know how to sell themselves emotionally. She's more interested in people who know how to be real without turning every interaction into a transaction. The truth is, she wants emotional depth. She wants conversations that are not based on scoring value, but on understanding thoughts, fears, habits, and truth. But most environments do not encourage that. They encourage quick judgment instead of slow understanding. So she becomes more observant, more selective, less impressed by surface level charm. Because once you start seeing people treating connection like a deal, it becomes harder to unsee it. And after that, anything less than genuine connection starts to feel like noise dressed up as interest. Number 10, she can sense performance almost instantly. There's a moment early in dating that most people do not realize is being observed so closely. It is not what you say. It is how naturally you are being it. A Sigma female often picks up on this faster than expected. Not because she is trying to judge, but because she has learned to notice patterns in how people present themselves when they are trying to be liked. In the first few weeks, many people are not fully themselves. They are a version of themselves, carefully edited, slightly exaggerated, smoothed around the edges. They choose the right jokes, the right stories, the right level of confidence. Everything feels slightly rehearsed. Even when it looks casual. At first, it can be hard to spot. It looks like charm. It looks like effort. It even looks like interest. But over time, small cracks start to appear. A confidence that feels too switched on at the right moments. A vulnerability that shows up at strategic times, but never goes too deep. A story that sounds slightly different when told again. Kindness that feels like it is being measured instead of expressed. She notices all of it. Not in a critical way, but in a quiet mental way. Like her mind is connecting dots in the background while the conversation is still happening. For example, someone might talk about being very ambitious, always driven, always focused. But their actions do not match the urgency they describe. Or they may open up about personal struggles, but it feels timed, like it is being used to create closeness rather than shared honestly. And that is where something changes for her. Because once she realizes she is not interacting with a person, but with a performance, her interest starts to fade without drama. It is not disappointment. It is clarity. She does not want a carefully constructed version of someone. She is not interested in rehearsed charm or emotional scripting. She wants consistency. She wants natural behavior that does not need to be maintained. The raw human underneath the image matters more than the image itself. When she senses performance, attraction does not slowly disappear. It collapses quietly, because connection for her is not about how well someone can present themselves. It is about how real they can stay when they stop trying to be liked. In final words, not everyone is alone because they cannot find love. Some are alone because they refuse to lose themselves inside it. When you look at a Sigma female, it is easy to misunderstand her silence, her standards, or her distance. But the real story is not about rejection or lack of opportunity. It is about awareness. She has seen enough patterns in people to stop confusing intensity with sincerity. She has experienced how quickly words can feel beautiful, but still mean very little in action. So she stops reacting to charm and starts observing consistency. That alone removes a lot of people from her world without any conflict. She also values peace more than emotional chaos disguised as love. If something feels confusing for too long, she does not try to fix it endlessly. She steps back, not because she is cold, but because she understands that clarity should not be painful all the time. Over time, this makes her dating experience very different from most people. She is not easily pulled in by attention. She is not impressed by performance. She is not moved by temporary emotional highs. She looks for depth, stability, and truth in behavior, not promises. And that is where the difficulty lies. Very few people operate at that level of honesty and consistency. Many can impress for a short time, but fewer can remain real when comfort fades and communication becomes necessary. She waits. Sometimes longer than expected, not because she is avoiding love, but because she refuses to settle for emotional confusion. If there is one thing to understand, it is this. She is not struggling to find someone. She is filtering out everything that does not feel real enough to stay. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.